Alright, this is chapter 13 of Where the Red Fern Grows, part 2. I feel like there's something in my teeth. Okay. Alright, now, so I left off where it said that the silence seemed straight and expectant, like a young boy waiting for a firecracker to explode. Alright, here we go. I looked at old Dan. He was standing perfectly still, with his right front foot raised and his long ears fanned open. He seemed to be listening and challenging any living creature to make a noise. The silence was broken by the whee of a red-tailed hawk. This seemed to be a signal. All around me, the happy atmosphere resumed its natural state. Now, okay, let's get spiritual here. I would go through my spirit animal deck and find out what a red hawk would mean. I'm not going to, because then again I'm going to regret doing that. Second of all, energy and vibrations. Yes. We're talking about high vibration, a high vibration environment right now. Alright. So, anyway, this seemed to be a signal. All around me, the happy atmosphere resumed its natural state. I heard the bam, bam, bam of a woodpecker high in the top of a box elder snag. The cry of a kingfisher and the scream of a blue jay blended perfectly with the drum-like beat. A barking red squirrel, glued to the side of a hackberry tree, kept time to the music with the beat of its tail. Each noise I heard and each sight I saw was very familiar to me, but I never grew tired of listening and watching. They were a God-sent gift, and I enjoyed them all. As I skipped along, it was hard for me to realize all the wonderful things that happened to me in such a few short years. I had two of the finest little hounds that ever bawled on the trail of a ring-tailed coon. I had a wonderful mother and father and three little sisters. I had the best grandpa a boy ever had. Now, granted, I have to be honest, okay? When a child says, "You're the best mom ever," there is obviously some partiality there, and the reason for that is quite, it's clear. I mean, it's the only mother you had. It's the only grandpa you had. So, that's great. But, your vision for the world is super narrow. If you're saying that this is the best, this is the be all end all. And that's great. I mean, I'm not here to say anything against that. It could range from being amazing, high vibration, really positive. It could also be adorable depending upon the circumstances. I'm just pointing it out that it is partial. Now, it says I had the best grandpa a boy ever had, and to top it all, I was going on a championship coon hunt. It was no wonder that my heart was bursting with happiness. Wasn't I the luckiest boy in the world? Everyone was just sitting down to supper when I got home. My sisters quit the table for the candy. I told them to divide it equally. The oldest one asked if I wanted any of it. No, I said. I bought it all for you. Of course, I didn't tell them about the 4 pieces I had in my pocket. They thanked me with their clear blue eyes. I guess it's pretty hard for a young boy to fool his mama. She took one look at me and called me over. She ruffled up my hair, kissed me, and said, "If that little boy's eyes get any bigger, they're going to pop right out of his head." Now tell me, what are you so happy about? Before I could say anything, Papa chuckled and asked, "What's going on between you and your grandpa?" Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Okay, that's the thing I hate about reading, is because when you're reading and when you're making dialogue for characters, it is going to sound fake. It is not going to sound authentic. So I'm going to give myself, I'm willing to sit here and say that that was not authentic. That was not authentic. That was not true. I'm willing to say that. And if I do something that is not authentic, if I say something, I will come right out and admit it, that it was not authentic, because that is what, I want to do, because I want to be authentic in that way, in that real, honest way. So, that was not authentic. Not real. So Papa chuckled and asked, "What's going on?" But again, another intrusive thought that I'm sitting here having. Papa chuckled and asked, "What's going on between you and your grandpa? What are you and that old man cooking up now?" As fast as I could talk, I started telling about the big coon hunt. I told how hard Grandpa had been working to have my dogs entered, and how he had already paid my entry fee. Catching my breath and looking at Papa, I said, "We're going in the buggy, and he wants you to go." I waited in silence for his reply. Papa sat there staring off into space, sipping his coffee and saying nothing. I knew what he was thinking. In the silence, I was sure I could hear my heart thumping. I said, "Papa, please go. We'll have a lot of fun, and besides, the winner receives a big golden cup." He scratched his head and said, "Billy, I'd sure like to go, but I don't see how I can with all this work around here." I was beginning to think that Papa wasn't going to go. Then Mama started talking. "Work," she said. "Why, all the work is practically done. I don't know. okay, now yeah, again, you know, this why at the beginning of a sentence, I mean, I have seen plays of people reading Oscar. I mean, I have to stop and talk about this because it's coming up. I have seen, I mean, oh my goodness, I was at not like a really, just a bad play in like the middle of November. And it does not deserve to be a treasured memory of mine. I could not look at those actors on stage performing the play. I could not, because it was absolutely, you know, you know, way child's play and way below my expectations. Excuse me when I say expectations, way below my taste in good acting. It was, it sounded rehearsed. It sounded like people were memorizing lines. I mean, let's give them something kind of, something with heart in it. Something that's real. Something with, um, you know, gravitas in it. Not a neat, fluffy bunny, goofy, play as that was. Let the older people, the older actresses and actors, save for myself, but let the older people carry out those roles. Choose something real and with depth. If there is a play going on, and I mean, I hate to say this, but people my age or below my age, you know, give them something real, something with heart in it. Because I'm sure that it would be more real than something really, goofy. And I mean, when it comes to a play, I mean, there was this one part of the play where this person was walking up and then said something and walked directly back. Bad. If you're gonna stand there, then don't be a person who's gonna, I'm coming here to deliver a message and then I'm just gonna, walk away. Like, is that real? And does it look good as not being real? It doesn't look that great. I I did admire that, and that's pretty, not good. It's pretty terrible. It's bad acting. It was kind of, I don't know, not the best way to spend the afternoon, but it was fun. Um, but yeah, I mean, I didn't have much to say about it. So anyway, I said, Papa, please go. We'll have a lot of fun, and besides, the winner receives a big golden cup. He scratched his head and said, Billy, I'd sure like to go, but I don't see how I can with all this work around here. I was beginning to think that Papa wasn't going to go. Then Mama started talking. Work, she said. All the work is practically done. I don't know of one thing you couldn't put off for a few days. Why don't you go? You haven't been anywhere since I don't know when. It's not only the work I'm thinking of, Papa said. It's you and the girls. Why? Don't worry about the girls and me, Mama said. We'll be all right. Besides, It'll be several months yet before I need any help. When Mama said this, it dawned on me. I had been so busy with my coon hunting I hadn't noticed anything unusual. Mama's tummy was all swelled up. She was going to have a baby. I felt guilty for not having noticed. I went over and put my arms around her and kissed her. Papa spoke up. "It's sure going to be a big hunt," he said. "I heard something about it up at the store one day. Grandpa said there would be hunters there from everywhere," I said, "and some of the best coonhounds in the country." "Do you think you have a chance to win the cup?" Papa asked. I started to answer him when a little one piped out. When the little one piped up. "They can't beat old Dan and Little Ann," she said. "I just bet they can." Everyone laughed at her serious remark. I would have kissed her, but she had candy cornbread and molasses all over her face. I told Papa I didn't know how good those dogs were, but there was one thing I did know. If they beat mine, they would have to hunt harder than they ever had before. After I had okay, this is this is what you call a redundancy in literature. When you have two words right next to each other that are the same word, take out one of those words. This, I'm going to highlight it so that you can see if I can. This is a redundancy. This is a redundancy right here. Can you see this? Let me highlight it again. Yeah, after I had my say about my dogs, that there has to be a typo, because if it's not a typo, guess what? It isn't grammatically correct. Period. End of story. Now, anyway, after I had my say about the dogs, a silence settled over the dining room. Everyone was looking at Papa and waiting for his answer. I saw a pleased smile spread over his face. He stood up. "All right, I'll go," he said. "And by golly, we'll bring that gold cup back too." My sisters started clapping their hands and squealing with delight. A satisfied smile spread over my mother's face. At that moment, I'm sure no boy in the world could have been happier than I. Tears of happiness rolled down my cheeks. Mama wiped them away with her apron. In the midst of all that excitement, my little sister, saying not a word, climbed down from her chair. No one said anything. We just watched her. Still clutching a spoon in her small hand, she came around the table and walked up to me. Looking down at the floor in a bashful voice, she asked, "Can I have the gold cup?" Putting my finger under her sticky little chin, I tilted her head up. I smiled as I looked into her clean blue eyes. I said, "Honey, if I win it, I'll give it to no one but you." I had to cross my heart and hope to die several times before she was satisfied. Back in her chair, she gloated over the others. "You just wait and see," she said. "It'll be all mine, nobody's but mine, and I'll put my Banty eggs in it." "Silly. You don't put Banty eggs in a gold cup," the oldest one said. "They're just made to look at." The night I dreamed about gold cups, little round hounds, and coons as big as rain barrels. Once I woke myself up whooping the dogs. Okay, moving on. Okay. The next few days were busy ones for me. Knowing that Papa and I would be gone for several days, I did everything I could to make things convenient for Mama. I chopped a large pile of wood and stacked it close to the kitchen door. To make it easy for her to feed her stock, I cut some poles from the hillside and boxed up one of the stalls in the barn. I filled it full of hay so she wouldn't have to climb the ladder to the loft. Papa laid down the law to my sisters about being good and helping Mama while we were gone. The day before we were to leave, I was as nervous as a June bug in a henhouse. The day seemed endless. A few of the miserable hours were spent talking to my dogs. I told them all about the big hunt and how important it was. Now, if you don't win the Golden Cup, I said, I won't be mad because I know you will do your best. Old Dan wouldn't even look at me and paid no attention to what I said. He was sulking because I hadn't been taking him hunting. When I talked to little Anne, it was different. She listened and seemed to understand everything I said. I dreaded to go to bed that night. I thought sleep would be impossible. I must have been more tired than I thought I was. I fell asleep almost immediately. Old Red, our rooster, woke me up at daybreak, crowing his full head off. It was a beautiful morning, clear and frosty. After a good breakfast, we kissed Mama goodbye and started for the store. I'm sure there were a lot of coon hunters in the Ozarks, but on that morning none could have felt as big and important as I. Walking along by the side of my father, I threw out my chest and tried hard to keep pace with his long strides. He noticed and laughed. You'll have to grow a little bit, he said, before you can take steps that long. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Hearing a noise overhead, I looked up. The gray ones were winging their way southward. I listened to their talking and wondering what they were saying. Looking to the mountains around us, I saw that the mysterious artist who comes at night had paid us a visit. I wondered how he could paint so many different colors in one night. Red, wine, yellow, and rust. Did the author mean white when he said that? My dogs were trotting along in front of us. I smiled at the way their hindquarters shifted to the right. Little Anne would jump and bounce and try to get old Dan to play, but the solemn old boy just jogged along, heedless of everything. You know, Papa said she doesn't even act like a hound. She's just bouncing and playing all the time. Why, she acts more like a little pup than a hound. Yes, I know, I said. I've noticed that myself. But you know one thing, Papa? She's the smartest dog I've ever seen. Why, some of the things she does are almost unbelievable. Yes, I know, said Papa. But still, it's strange, very strange. There's only one thing wrong with her, Papa, I said. Yeah, what's that? He asked. You won't believe it, I said. But she's gun-shy. Now, the first time I came across this term, gun-shy, I was watching an episode of Keeping Up Appearances, and they were going to Violet's Country Cottage and putting on a barbecue. There was this one woman who said, "Where's my gun-shy?" Beep, swear word. We came across it earlier in this book, bitch. I'm not going to say the word, but you know the word. Is that another name for the dog? But anyway, you know, yeah. So that's the first time I came across that. Because talking about a dog. Sally, I think her name was. Okay. But anyway, yeah, what's that? He asked. You won't believe it, I said, but she's gun-shy. Gun-shy? How do you know she's gun-shy? Papa asked. I didn't know for a long time, I said, until one day when I was hoeing corn down in the field by the old slough. She and old Dan were digging in a bank after a groundhog. Across the river, some fishermen started shooting a gun. It scared little Anne. Oh my goodness gracious. It scared little Anne, and she came running to me, shaking all over. Oh, Papa said. Maybe you just thought she was scared. No, I didn't, Papa, I said. It happened again up at the store one day. Grandpa shot a chicken hawk. When the gun went off, it scared her half to death. No, she's gun shy all right. Oh, well, Papa said, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of dogs are afraid of guns. I know, I said. Taught you wouldn't think she would be that way. I believe if I had a gun of my own, I could break her of being gun shy. Papa looked at me. He said, From what your mother says, you won't be getting a gun for some time yet. Yes, I know, I said. When we reached the store, we saw the team had already hitched to the buggy and was standing in front of the store. Grandpa had loaded the tent and several boxes of groceries. I'd never seen him in such high spirits. He slapped Papa on the back, saying, I'm sure glad you could go with us. It'll do you good to get out once in a while. Papa laughed and said, Looked like I had to go or have everyone in the family mad at me. Looking in the buggy, I saw my axe. I didn't think I ever wanted to see it again, but for some reason it didn't look like I thought it would. There was no blood on it, and it looked harmless enough, laying there all clean and bright. Grandpa saw me looking at it. He came over. I kept it a few days, he said, just in case the marshal wanted to ask some questions. Everything seems to be all right now, and we may need a good axe on this hunt. Grandpa sensed how I felt about the axe. He waited in silence for my answer. The excitement of the hunt was so strong in me, even the sight of the axe brought back only a fleeting remembrance of Reuben's accident. I said, Yes, we will need one. Besides, it's a good one, and there is no use in throwing it away. Grandpa laughed, reached over, and screwed my cap around on my head, saying, That's the boy. That's what I wanted you to say. Now, you better go to the barn and get some hay and make a bed in the buggy box for your dogs. Oh, Grandpa, I said, they can walk. They don't ever get tired. Besides, they're used to walking. Walk? Grandpa almost shouted. They're not going to walk. No, sir, not if I can help it. You want them to be footsore when... Yeah. You want them to be footsore when we get there? Papa chuckled and said, We can't... Papa chuckled and said, We can't win a gold cup with two sore footed hounds, can we? Of course not, Grandpa said. Now you go and get that hay like I said. As I turned to go to the barn, I couldn't help but smile. It made me feel good to have my Papa and Grandpa so concerned about my dogs. I had taken only a few steps when Grandpa said, Oh, wait a minute. I stopped and turned around. Walking up to me and glancing toward the house as he did, he whispered, In that empty crot barrel in the harness room, there's a jug of corn liquor. Cover it up in the hay so your grandma won't see it, and bring it back with you. With a twinkle in his eye, he said, You never can tell when we'll need some medicine. I knew my father wouldn't drink any of the liquor, but if Grandpa wanted to take along a whole barrel, it was all right with me. Just when I thought we were ready to leave, Grandma came bustling out. Grandpa got nervous. He whispered and asked, Did you hide the jug good? I nodded my head. Grandpa handed Grandpa a pair of long handle underwear and a scarf, saying, I knew you'd forget something. Grandpa snorted, but knew there was no use arguing with her. She started picking around in the groceries, asking about salt, pepper, and matches. Nanny, we've got everything, he said. You must think I'm a baby and don't know how to pack a grub box. A baby, Grandma snorted. Why, you're worse than a baby. At least they have a little sense. You don't have any at all. An old codger like you out chasing a coon all over the hills. At her biting remark, I thought Grandpa was going to blow up. He snorted like Daisy, our milk cow, when she had seen a booger. I crawled up in the buggy box with my dogs and hung my feet out. Grandma came over and asked me about warm clothes. I told her I had plenty. She kissed me goodbye and we were on our way. And that is the end of chapter 13 of Where the Red Fern Grows. I just want to count how many pages of the 14th chapter. Oh my gosh, chapter 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 8 pages. Okay. So Grandma came over and asked me about warm clothes. I told her I had plenty. She kissed me goodbye and we were on our way. Over a dim, rocky road in a northeasterly direction, our buggy moved on. I noticed that the road stayed at the edge of the foothills, but always in sight of the river. About the middle of the afternoon, we stopped at a small stream to water the team. Papa asked Grandpa if he intended to go all the way to the campground before stopping. No, he said. I figure to put up for the night when we reach Bluebird Creek. With a good early start in the morning, we can make the campgrounds in plenty of time to pitch out tent and set up camp. Late that evening, we reached Bluebird Creek. We didn't set up our tent. With a tarp we made to lean to and build a large fire out in front of it. While Grandpa fed and watered the team, Papa and I carried our bedding to the shelter and made down our beds. Grandpa said, "While we're cooking supper, you see to your dogs, feed them, and fix them a warm bed." I figure I cooked them some cornmeal mush, I said. That's what they used to eating. Oh my goodness. Let me just correct myself here. Okay. This is profound right here. Let me just reference me because I can hint at what is going to happen next. Okay, let me just read it and then I'll tell you. While we're cooking supper, you see to your dogs, feed them and fix them a warm bed. I figure I cooked them some cornmeal mush, I said. That's what they're used to eating. Mush, Grandpa growled, but not gonna have mush. Not if I can help it. Now, when I was little, I had absolutely no idea about my taste buds and what they would actually be. When I was at my grandma's one time, I remember, and it's on video, I asked, saying I wanted ham and cheese sandwich for lunch. I didn't know that I would come to dislike that kind of thing. I don't know why I asked that question, but I did. So anyway. I figured to cook some. Okay. He walked over to a grocery box, mumbling as he did. Mush, a hound can't hunt on a belly full of that stuff. He came back and handed me 2 large cans of corned beef hash, saying, "Here, reckon they'll eat this." I wanted to hug my old grandpa's neck. "Sure, Grandpa," I said, "they'll love that." Opening one of the cans, I dunked it out on a piece of bark in front of old Dan. He sniffed at it and refused to eat. I laughed, for I knew why. While I was opening the other can, Grandpa came over. "What's the matter?" he asked. "Going to eat it?" "Sure, Grandpa," I said. "He'll eat it, but not before little Ann gets her share." With the second can open, I fed on another piece of bark, Both of them started eating at the same time. With an astonished look on his face, Grandpa explained, "Well, I'll be darned, I never saw anything like that. I never saw a hound that wouldn't eat. Did you train them to do that?" "No, Grandpa," I said, "they've always been that way. They won't take anything away from each other, and everything they do it as one." Papa, and that's also profound too. All for all and all for one. I mean, never mind. Papa had overheard our conversation. He said, "You think that's strange? You should have seen what I saw one day." One of the girls threw 2 cold biscuits out in the backyard to old Dan. He stood and looked at it for a bit, then picking both of them up in his mouth, he trotted along the house, or he trotted around the house. I followed just to see what he was going to do. He walked up in front of the doghouse, laid them down, and growled, not like he was mad. It was a strange kind of a growl. Little Ann came out of the doghouse, and each of them ate a biscuit. Now I saw this with my own eyes. Believe me, those dogs are close to each other, real close. After Papa had stopped talking, silence settled over the camp. Grandpa stood staring at my dogs. In a slow voice, as if he were picking his words, he said, "You know, I've always felt like there was something strange about those dogs. I don't know just what it is, and I can't exactly put my finger on it. Yet I can feel it. Maybe it's just my imagination, I don't rightly know." Turning to my father, he said, "Did you ever notice Turning to my father, he said, "Did you ever notice the way they watch this boy? They see every move he makes." Papa said, "Yes, I've noticed a lot of things they have done. In fact, I could tell you of a few that you would never believe. But right now here's something you had better believe. Supper is ready." While I was helping myself to hot Dutch oven cornbread, fried potatoes, and fresh side meat, Grandpa poured the coffee. Instead of the 2 cups I expected to see, he set out 3 and filled them to the brim with a strong black liqueur. I had never been allowed to drink coffee at home and didn't exactly know what to do. I glanced at Papa. He seemed too busy with his eating to pay any attention to me. Taking the bull by the horns, I reached over and ran my finger through the cup's handle. I held my breath as I walked over and sat down by a post oak stump. Nothing was said. Grandpa and Papa paid no attention to what I did. My head swelled up as big as a number 4 wash tub. I thought, I'm not only big enough to help Papa with the farm, now I'm big enough to drink coffee. With supper over and the dishes washed, Grandpa said, "Well, we'd better turn in, as I want to get an early start in the morning." um, well, we'd better turn in as I want to get an early start in the morning. Long after Grandpa and Papa had fallen asleep, I lay thinking of the big hunt. My thoughts were interrupted with the wonders of night. Life began to stir in the silence around us. From a ridge on our right, a red fox started barking. He was curious and in his small way challenging the intruders that had dared to stop in his wild domain. From far back in the flinty hills, the monotonous call of a hoot owl floated down in the silent night. It was the mating call and was answered from a distant mountain. I could hear the stamping feet of our horses, and the grinding, crunching noise made by their strong teeth as they ate the hard, yellow kernels of corn in their feed boxes. A nighthawk screamed as he winged his way through the starlit night. An eerie screech from a tree close by made shivers run up and down my spine. It was a screech owl. I didn't like to hear the small owl, for there was a superstition in the mountains concerning them. It was said that if you heard one owl, it meant nothing at all, but if you heard more than one, it meant bad luck. I lay and listened to the eerie twittering sound. It was coming from the left of our camp. The creepy noise stopped, and for several moments there was silence. When next I heard the cry, it was coming from the right. I sat up in alarm. Had I heard two owls? My movement had awakened Grandpa. In a sleepy voice he asked, "What's the matter? Can't you sleep? What are you sitting up like that for?" "Grandpa, I heard two screech owls," I said. Grunting and mumbling, he sat up. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he said, "You heard two screech owls? Why, that's nothing. I've heard two." "Oh, I see. You're thinking of that bad luck superstition. There's nothing to that. Nothing at all. Now you lie down and go to sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a big day." I tried hard to fall asleep, but couldn't. I couldn't get the owls out of my mind. Had I really heard two? Were we going to have bad luck? Surely nothing could happen. Not on such a wonderful hunt. I found peace in my mind by telling myself that the owl had changed trees. Yes, that was it. He had simply flown out of one tree to another. The next morning, while having breakfast, Grandpa started kidding me about the screech owls. "I wish you could have caught one of those owls last night," he said. "We could have boiled him in our coffee pot. I heard there was nothing like strong hoot owl coffee." "It wasn't a hoot owl," Grandpa said. "It was a screech owl. I don't know for sure if I had heard one or two. It could have it could have just it could have been just one." Pointing to a small red oak. Um Pointing to a small red oak, I said, "I think the first time I heard him he was over there. The next time it was over in that direction." Let me just read from the beginning. "It wasn't a hoot owl, Grandpa," I said. "It was a screech owl. I don't know for sure if I had heard one or two. It could have been just one." Pointing to a small red oak, I said, "I think the first time I heard him he was over there. The next time it was over in that direction. Maybe he changed trees. I sure hope so." Grandpa saw I was bothered. "You don't believe that hogwash superstition, do you? Bad luck? Bah, there's nothing to it." Papa laughed and said, "These mountains are full of that jinx stuff. If a man believed it all, he'd go crazy." The encouraging words from Papa and Grandpa helped some, but there was still some doubt. It's hard for a young boy to completely forget things like that. Breakfast over and our gear stowed back in the buggy, we left Bluebird Creek. On that day, Grandpa drove a little faster than he had on the previous one. I was glad of this, for I was anxious to reach the campground. About noon he stopped the team. I heard him ask Papa, "Is this Black Fox Hollow?" "No," Papa said. "This is Waterfall. Black Fox is the next one over. Why?" "Well," Grandpa said, "there's supposed to be a white flag in the mouth of Black Fox. That's where we leave the road. The camp is in the river bottoms." By this time I was so excited I stood up in the buggy box so I could get a better view. "Maybe you ought to step them up a little, Grandpa," I said. "It's getting pretty late." Papa joined in with his loud laughter. "You just take it easy," he said. "We'll get there in plenty of time. Besides, these mares can't fly." I saw the flag first. "There it is," Grandpa I shouted. "Where?" he asked. "Over there. See, tied on that grapevine?" As we left the main road, I heard Papa say, "Boy, Look at all of those tracks. Look at all those tracks. Surely has been a lot of traveling on this road. That smoke over there must be coming from the camps, Grandpa said. When we came in sight of the camp, I couldn't believe what I saw. I stared in amazement. I had never seen so many people at one gathering. Tents were spread out over an acre and a half of ground, all colors, shapes, and sizes. There were old-looking cars, buggies, wagons, and saddle horses. I heard Grandpa say almost in a whisper, I knew there would be a lot of people here, but I never expected so many. I saw an astonished look on my father's face. Off to one side of the camp, under a large black gum tree, we set up our tent. I tied my dogs to the buggy and fixed a nice bed for them under it. After everything was taken care of, I asked if I could look around the camp. Sure, Grandpa said. Go any place you want to. Only don't get in anyone's way. I started walking through the large camp. Everyone was friendly. Once I heard a voice say, That's the boy who owns the two little red hounds. I've heard they're pretty good. If my head had gotten any bigger, I knew it would have burst. I walked on as straight as a canebrake cane. I looked at the hounds. They were tied in pairs here and there. I had seen many coon hounds, but none that could equal these. They were red bones, blue ticks, walkers, and bloodhounds. I marveled at their beauty. All were spotlessly clean with slick and glossy coats. I saw the beautiful leather leashes and brass-studded collars. I thought of my dogs. They were tied with small cotton ropes and had collars made from old check-lined leather. As I passed from one set of dogs to another, I couldn't help but wonder if I had a chance to win. I knew that in the veins of these hounds flowed the purest of breeded blood. No finer coon hounds could be found anywhere. They came from the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, the bayou country of Louisiana, the Red River bottoms of Texas, and the flinty hills of the Ozarks. Walking back through the camp, I could feel the cold fingers of doubt squeezing my heart. One look at my dogs drove all doubt away. In the eyes of little Anne, it seemed I could read this message. Don't worry, just wait, we'll show them. That night, Grandpa said, Tomorrow they'll have a contest for the best looking hound. Which one are you going to enter? I told him I didn't think I'd enter either one of my dogs. They were so little, I didn't think they had a chance. Grandpa got all buffed up. He said, It doesn't make any difference how little they are. They're coonhounds, aren't they? I asked him if he had seen any of the other hounds. He said, Yes, I've seen them all. Surely they're big and good dogs too, but it makes no difference. I don't care if your dogs are no bigger than a snuff can. They still have a chance. Now, which one are you going to enter? I couldn't decide, I said. I'll think it over tonight and let you know tomorrow. The next morning when I stepped outside the tent, I saw men everywhere. They were combing and brushing their dogs and getting them pruned for the beauty contest. Beautiful combs and brushes were used to brush expensive oils into their glossy hair. Going over to my dogs, I stood and looked at them. I started to untie old Dan, but taking a closer look at him, I could see he could never win a beauty contest. His face and ears were a mass of old scars, caused from the many fights with tough old coons and bobcats. I held his head in my hands and felt sorry for him, but loved him that much more. I looked little Anne over and couldn't see any scars. I laughed because I knew why. She was too smart to walk right up in the face of a fight. She would wait until old Dan took hold and then dart in. I untied her rope and walked her over to our tent. My father and grandfather were gone. No doubt they were over in some tent visiting old friends and making new ones. Looking around to find something I could use to groom my dog, I saw Grandpa's open suitcase. There, right on top, was the very thing I needed: his beautiful bone-handled hairbrush and his ivory comb. Picking them up, I turned them over and over in my hand. Little Anne stood looking at me. Impulsively, I reached down and ragged her from shoulder to hip with the brush. She seemed to like it. I knew I shouldn't do it, but I decided to use them. Knowing I had no oils, I got some butter from our grocery box. With the homemade butter and Grandpa's hair set, I brushed her on until she shone. All the time I was grooming her, she tried to lick the butter from my hands. The job completed, I stepped back and inspected her. I was surprised at the change. Her short red hair glistened, and everyone was in perfect place. Shaking my finger at her, I said, "If you lay down and roll, I'll wear you out," although I knew I wouldn't. Hearing a lot of movements outside, I looked out. Men were setting their dogs on a long table, which had been built in the center of the campground. Leading little Ann to it, I picked her up and set her on the table too. I told her to act like a lady. She wagged her tail as though she understood. I untied the rope and stepped back. After the dogs were all lined up, the judging started. 4 judges walked around and around the table, looking at them from all angles. When one of them would point at a hound, he was taken down and eliminated from the contest. Dog after dog was disqualified. Little Ann was still on the table. My eyes were wide, my throat dry, and my heart thumping. One judge stepped in front of little Ann. My heart stopped. Two reaching over, he patted her on the head. Turning to me, he asked, "Is this your dog?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded my head. He said, "She's a beautiful hound." He walked on down the line. My heart started beating again. Let's see how many pages. 1, 2, 3. 3 pages. He said, "She's a beautiful hound." He walked on down the line. My heart started beating again. There were 8 dogs left. Little Ann was still holding her own. Then there were 4. I was ready to cry. 2 more were taken down. Little Ann and a big Walker hound, owned by a Mr. Kyle, were the only ones left. The judges couldn't seem to make up their minds. Everyone started shouting, "Walk them, walk them." I didn't know what they meant. Mr. Kyle and I were told to go to one end of the table. Our dogs were placed at the other end. Mr. Kyle snapped his fingers and called to his dog. The big hound started walking toward his master. What a beautiful sight he was. He walked like a king. His body was stiff and straight, his head high in the air. His large muscles quivered and jerked under his glossy coat. But something went wrong. Just before he reached the end, he broke his stride, turned, and jumped down from the table. A low murmur ran through the crowd. It was my turn. 3 times I tried to call to little Ann. Words just wouldn't come out. My throat was too dry. The vocal cords refused to work, but I could snap my fingers. That was all I needed. She started toward me. I held my breath. There was silence all round me. As graceful as any queen, with her head high in the air and her long red tail arched in a perfect rainbow, my little dog walked down the table. With her warm gray eyes staring straight at me, on she came, walking up to me. She laid her head on my shoulder. As I put my arms around her, the crowd exploded. During the commotion, I felt hands slapping me on the back and heard the word congratulations time after time. The head judge came over and made a speech, handing me a small silver cup. He said, "Congratulations, son, it was justly won." The tears came rolling. I gathered my dog up in my arms and walked to our tent. Grandpa followed, proudly carrying the cup. That evening, the head judge stepped up on the table. He had a small box in his hand. He shouted, "Over here, men! I have some announcements to make." We all gathered around. In a loud voice, he said, "Gentlemen, the contest will start tonight. I'm sure most of you men have been in these hunts before. For those of you who haven't, I will explain the rules. Each night, 5 sets of dogs will be taken out to hunt. A judge will go along with each pair of hounds. Every morning, the judges will turn in the night's catch. The 2 hounds that trade the most coons will qualify for the championship runoff. The other 4 sets will be eliminated from the hound. Of course, if there is a tie, both sets will qualify. On the following nights, only those hounds tying the first night's score or getting more will be in the runoff. Now, gentlemen, this hunt must be carried out in a sportsmanlike way. If the coon is treed where he can't be caught, such as in a bluff, it will not be counted. You must catch the coon, skin it, and turn the hide over to your judge. You are allowed to take an axe, a lantern, and a gun with birdshot, which you can use to get a coon out of a tree. 25 sets of hounds have been entered in the hunt. In this box, I have 25 cards. Everyone in the contest will now line up for the drawing. The card you draw will tell you what night your hounds are to hunt. Walking along in the line, I noticed the beautiful red coats, the caps, and the soft leather boots worn by the other hunters. I felt out of place in my faded blue overalls, old sheepskin coat, and scuffed and worn shoes. But to the wonderful men it made no difference. They treated me like a man, and even talked to me like a man. When it came my time to draw, my hand was shaking so hard I could hardly get it in the box. Pulling the card out, I saw it had drawn the 4th night. After the hunters had left, we stood around our campfires, sipping strong black coffee and listening to the baying of the hounds. Time after time, we heard the tree bark. Once 2 hounds came close to the camp, but hot on a trail. We listened to their steady bawling. All at once, they stopped. After several minutes of waiting, a hunter said, "You know what? That old coon took to the river and in some way has fooled those dogs." Another one said, "Yes, sir, he sure has." A friendly hunter looked at me and asked, "Do you think he could have fooled your dogs?" Thinking his question over, I said, "You know, sometimes when I am hunting, away back in the mountains or down on the river, I sing a little song I made up myself. One of the verses goes like this: You can swim the river, old Mr. Ringtail, and play your tricks out one by one. It won't do any good, old Mr. Ringtail, my little Ann knows every one." The hunters roared with laughter. Some slapped me on the back. Tired and sleepy, but with a smile on my face, I went off to bed. The next morning, 2 blue tick hounds from the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee came out in the lead with 3 big coons to their credit. The other 4 sets were eliminated. The following morning, all 5 sets of dogs were eliminated. None had even tied the blue ticks, although 2 sets had gotten 2 coons, and one of these had trayed a third one in a bluff. That day, while eating dinner, my grandfather asked me if my dogs had ever treed 3 coons in one night. I said yes, 4 different times, but that's all. Where do you think we should hunt on our night? Papa asked. I told him if we could get our judge to go with us in the buggy, we would be better off if we could go far downriver and get out of the range where other dogs had hunted. He said, "That's a good idea. I'll go to see the judges about it." While I was washing the dishes, Grandpa said, "I think I'll shave." I should have left the tent then, but I wasn't alone with my dishwashing. With a pin, Grandpa hung a small mirror on the tent wall. After much snorting, mumbling, and screwing off his face this way and that, the job was completed. Dabbing a little water on his iron-gray hair, he reached for his brush and comb. From the corner of my eye, I watched him. I had tried to clean the beautiful brush, but hadn't been able to get all the short red hair from it. With 2 fingers, Grandpa pulled some of the hair from the bristles. Holding it in front of him, he looked it over carefully. Then, bending over close to the mirror, peeking over his glasses, he inspected his head. Straightening up, he looked at the brush again. Turning around quickly, he looked straight at me and said, "Say, young," not waiting for anything more. I scooted for the door. Crawling under the buggy, I lay down between my dogs. I knew he wouldn't be mad at me, but it would be best to stay away for a while. The third night, the blue ticks were tied by two black and tan hounds from the bayou country of Louisiana. All that day I was restless. I prowled through the camp. Every little while I would go and see how old Dan and little Ann were. Once I took 2 weenies from our groceries. I heated them and gave them to my dogs for a treat. Old Dan swallowed his down in one gulp and looked at me as if to say, "Is that all?" Little Ann ate hers in a ladylike way. I could have sworn I saw a small grin on her face. Grandpa was hopping around like a grasshopper, going here and there. Once passing a tent, I heard his voice. I knew he was bragging about my dogs. I smiled to myself. Another hunter stopped me and asked, "Is it true that your hounds have treed 6 coons in one night? 3 up in one tree? Or is that old man just blowing off steam?" I told him my grandfather had a little steam, but he was the best grandpa a boy ever had. He patted me on the head, turned, and walked away laughing. And that's the end of chapter 14 of Where the Red Fern Grows.